For 30 years, they had been getting their haircuts at the same barber shop, but they had never paid attention. The old barber never spoke, just turned the razor in his hand. Until that day, when a young customer noticed something else along with the razor, the marks on his hands. They were war scars. Welcome to Hidden Hero Stories. Before we begin this powerful story, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be remembered, hit that subscribe button and help us make sure they are. On Main Street in Springfield, there stood an old barber shop. The rotating striped pole in its window had slowed with the weight of years, its paint faded, but it had stood in the same place for 40 years. Just like the barber inside, Frank Morrison. Frank was 67 years old, gray-haired, pale-faced man. Every morning he opened his shop at 7, closed it at 6 in the evening. He didn't like talking to his customers. He would just nod, ask, "How should I cut it?" That was all. The men of Springfield had grown accustomed to Frank. They met his silence with respect. Some would whisper, "He might be a Vietnam veteran." But no one dared to ask. There was such depth in Frank's eyes that questions would get caught in their throats. That Tuesday morning, everything started differently than usual. It was drizzling outside. Frank opened his shop as always, arranged his tools, razors, scissors, brushes. Everything was perfectly in order. When his first customer arrived, it was only 7:30. Old Jim Patterson had been sitting in the same chair for 30 years. Frank turned the razor in his hand while Jim watched Frank's face in the mirror. No expression, just concentration. "Not nice weather today," said Jim. Frank nodded. "No." Jim had always admired how calm Frank's hands were. The razor moved with precise movements like a surgeon's scalpel. No trembling, no hesitation. At 9 o'clock, the second customer arrived. Young Marcus Rodriguez, 25 years old, a newly married construction worker. He had moved to Springfield 2 months ago. He had never been to Frank's before. When Marcus sat in the chair, Frank's silence made him a bit uncomfortable. At other barbershops, there was always conversation, jokes, but here there was only the rhythm of scissors. "I just moved here," said Marcus. "I know," Frank said briefly. Marcus was surprised. How could he know? But he couldn't ask. Frank's presence was so heavy that unnecessary questions weren't asked. When it came time for the shave, Frank took the razor in his hand. Marcus watched Frank's hands in the mirror. At that moment, something caught his attention. The way Frank held the razor. It was professional. Very professional. As a construction worker, Marcus had seen people whose hands were in terrible condition. But Frank's hands were different. There were old scars, yes? But these scars, these weren't work accident scars. Frank applied soap to Marcus's face. The warmth and gentleness of his hands surprised Marcus. These hands resembled surgeons' hands more than barbers' hands. "How long have you been a barber?" asked Marcus. 40 years, said Frank. But Marcus caught the expression in Frank's eyes. Something was hidden there, as if this answer was half true. Frank touched the razor to Marcus's cheeks. Every movement was perfect. Marcus held his breath. This way of using the razor. This might not just come from barbering. "Did you do other jobs before?" asked Marcus. Frank's hand stopped for a second. Very brief, but Marcus noticed. "No," said Frank. "I've always been a barber." But Marcus heard the change in Frank's tone. There was a lie there. And the marks on Frank's hands, these weren't just from scissor cuts. When the shave was finished, Marcus thanked Frank. But as he left, questions remained in his mind. Who was this man really? Lunchtime was Frank's busiest time. Customers came one after another. Each one was amazed by Frank's skill. But none of them knew his real story. At 2 o'clock, Tom Bradley came, a 60-year-old retired police officer. Tom had known Frank for 20 years, but he still didn't know anything about him. "Frank," said Tom as he sat in the chair, "did you ever get married?" Frank shook his head. "No. You never talk about your family." Frank's hand stopped on the razor. "There's nothing to talk about." Tom heard the pain in Frank's voice. There was a deep wound there. But what kind of a wound? While Frank was shaving Tom watched Frank's face in the mirror. There was such concentration there, as if he was performing surgery. "How did you learn this job?" asked Tom. "I learned," said Frank. But Tom, with his police experience, could tell Frank was lying. This man had learned barbering from somewhere else, and that place wasn't an ordinary barber school. Towards evening, Marcus came back, not for a haircut this time. His curiosity had brought him back. "Frank," he said, "I was here this morning. I want to ask you something." Frank was cleaning. He was carefully wiping his razors. "Where did you get this razor?" asked Marcus. Frank's hand stopped. He took the razor in his hand, looked at it carefully. There was a small engraving on the razor's handle. Marcus hadn't noticed it before. "Old," said Frank. Marcus came closer. He saw the engraving on the razor's handle. It read, 1968, Vietnam. And below it, a small cross with a medical symbol. Marcus's breath stopped. You're not a barber, are you?" Frank looked at Marcus. In that look was the weight of years, the weight of war, the weight of losses. "I'm a barber now," Frank said quietly. "But before?" asked Marcus. Frank put the razor back. He walked to the door, turned the lock. Then he turned to Marcus. "I was a military medic assistant in Vietnam, 68 to 71. I treated wounded on the front line. This razor. In my last mission, we had run out of scalpels. I had to save lives with this razor." Marcus froze. "How many people's lives did you save?" Frank's eyes misted. "I don't know the count, but I remember how many I lost. 23 people. They died in my hands." The room fell into silence. Marcus now understood what the marks on Frank's hands meant. "Why did you become a barber?" he asked. Frank looked in the mirror. "Because when I returned from Vietnam, my hands only remembered causing pain. By barbering, I learned that I could touch people again, touch them without harm." Marcus's eyes filled. "Does no one know?" "I don't want them to know," said Frank. "I'm just Frank now, Frank the barber." But Marcus now looked at Frank with different eyes. This man's hands weren't created just for cutting hair, but for saving lives. "What about those 23 people? Did you ever call their families?" Frank's face wrinkled. "I memorized each of their names. Jason Miller, Kevin Thompson, Robert Chen." He began counting. Marcus was shocked to see how clearly Frank said these names. "You still remember these names?" "I see them in my dreams every night," said Frank. "I can't forget those who died in my hands, but I can't forget those I saved either." That night when Marcus went home, he kept thinking about Frank's story. How heavy was the burden this man had been carrying for 40 years. The next day, Marcus decided to do research. He searched Vietnam War records at the library. He searched for hours and finally found it. Corporal Franklin Morrison, 1st Cavalry Division, Medical Unit, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. The document read, "Saved the lives of 47 wounded soldiers under enemy fire." When medical supplies ran out, he continued treatment using innovative methods. Marcus's hand was trembling. Frank was a hero, a real hero. And he hadn't told anyone all these years. That evening, Marcus went to Frank's shop. Frank was about to close. "Frank," said Marcus, "I researched you." Frank's face tensed. "Why?" "Because I was curious, and I was shocked by what I learned." Marcus took out the document he found. Frank's face went pale. 47 people, said Marcus. "You saved 47 people's lives." Frank took the document in his hand. He looked at it for a long time. Then he turned to Marcus. "That's in the past." "No, it's not," said Marcus, "because you're still saving lives." Frank was surprised. "What do you mean?" "Every day, people who come here feel the warmth of your hands. They take your calmness, your peace. Tom Bradley told me last week, I feel safe around Frank. He doesn't know it, but he's right." Frank's eyes misted. "And this razor," said Marcus, "is still saving lives. Maybe it's not drawing blood anymore, but it's making people feel good about themselves." Looking at Frank's hands, he no longer saw just barber hands. He saw medic hands, hero hands. "Frank," said Marcus, "would you like me to share your story?" Frank shook his head. "Number, I'm just a barber now." But Marcus noticed that Frank emphasized the word now, so he was something else once. Throughout that week, Marcus watched Frank with different eyes. Every time a customer came, he saw how gentle Frank's hands were. These hands weren't just barbering, they were healing. On Friday, old Mrs. Peterson came for her husband's shave. Frank was so gentle with 80-year-old Mr. Peterson that Marcus's heart ached. "Frank," said Mrs. Peterson, "you're an angel. My husband's hands shake now, but he calms down around you." Frank smiled. For the first time, Marcus saw Frank's real smile. When the shave was finished, Mr. Peterson touched Frank's hand. "Thank you, son. You're a very good person." Frank squeezed the old man's hand. "You're welcome." At that moment, Marcus understood. Frank had saved lives in war. Now he was saving lives in a different way, by touching people, giving them peace, making them feel valuable. That evening, as Frank was closing the shop, Marcus approached him one last time. "Frank, can I say something?" Frank nodded. "You never took barber training, did you?" Frank laughed. Number. After I returned from war, I didn't know what my hands would do. One day I saw a barber using a razor, but that razor only cut hair. It didn't draw blood. Then I thought, maybe I could use these hands for good, Marcus completed. "Yes," said Frank. "I've been doing that for 40 years. Marcus shook Frank's hand. "Frank, I'm very happy to have met you." Frank smiled. "Me too, Marcus." That night, as Marcus sat at home, he thought about Frank's story. This man was a real hidden hero. He had saved lives in war, then continued saving lives in civilian life. And the most beautiful part was, he hadn't told anyone. He had just lived it. The next week, when Marcus went to Frank's shop, he noticed a small change there. There was an old photograph hanging on the wall, taken in Vietnam, a group of soldiers from the medical unit. "Frank," said Marcus, "is this you?" Frank nodded. "Me and my friends, 1970 Da Nang." Marcus looked at the photograph. Frank was very young then, but there was the same depth in his eyes. "Do you miss them?" "Every day," said Frank, "but I keep them alive here." Marcus looked at Frank's hands. Those hands weren't just barber hands anymore. They were hero hands. "Frank," said Marcus, "can I ask you a question?" "Sure." "Did you ever regret it, becoming a barber?" Frank thought. Number. "Because I'm saving lives here too, maybe in a different way, but I'm still saving them." Marcus smiled. Frank was right. This shop wasn't just a barber shop. It was a small healing center, and Frank Morrison wasn't just a barber. He was Springfield's hidden hero. As Marcus went home that day, he thought about Frank's words. "I'm saving lives here too." How true that was. Frank touched 11 people every day, gave them peace, made them feel important. But the story didn't end here, because Marcus had made a decision after learning Frank's past. Monday morning, when Marcus came to Frank's shop, he had a surprise with him. He was carrying a small box in his arms. "Frank," he said, "I brought you something." Frank looked at the box curiously. When Marcus opened the box, an old medical kit came out, from the 1960s, original military medical supplies. "What is this?" asked Frank, his voice trembling. "I found it at an antique shop. It's from the Vietnam era. I thought it was like a kit you used." Frank's hands tremblingly took the kit. He looked at the materials inside. Old bandages, antiseptic bottles, needles. He held each one as if meeting an old friend. "This bottle," said Frank, pointing to a small antiseptic bottle, "is exactly like the one I used when I saved Kevin's life." Marcus's heart ached. "Kevin?" "Kevin Thompson. He was 19 years old, from Ohio. He was shot in the abdomen. I cleaned his wound with this antiseptic, stopped the bleeding with bandages. I saved him that day." Frank's eyes had misted. "I wonder, is he still alive?" Marcus saw the longing in Frank's face. "Did you ever try to call him?" Frank shook his head. There's no point in stirring up the past." But Marcus could hear the longing in Frank's voice. This man wondered about the people he saved. That night, Marcus decided to do research. He searched for Kevin Thompson on the internet. Ohio, Vietnam veteran. He searched for hours, and finally found him. Kevin Thompson, 71 years old, lived in Akron, Ohio. He was a retired teacher, married, 3 children, 5 grandchildren. And there was a paragraph on his website. "I owe my life to a secret angel who helped me in Vietnam. Corporal Frank Morrison, if you're reading this, I want you to know that because of the family you saved, I've been happy for 52 years. Marcus's heart began beating rapidly. Kevin was looking for Frank. The next day, Marcus excitedly went to Frank. "Frank, I found Kevin Thompson." Frank's face went pale. "What?" Marcus showed what he found on his computer. Frank's hands were trembling. Does he remember me?" "He doesn't just remember, he's looking for you. He's been looking for you for 52 years. Frank collapsed into the chair. "This isn't possible." "Frank, he lived because of you. He got married, had children, became a teacher. He educated hundreds of children, all because of you. Tears began streaming from Frank's eyes. I just did what I had to do. Yes, but what you had to do gave him life. Marcus said he found the phone number. Frank hesitated at first, then agreed. That evening, Frank called Kevin after 52 years. When the phone rang, Kevin's voice came. Hello? Kevin? I'm Frank Morrison. Silence on the other end. Then a scream. Frank! My God, Frank, I've been looking for you for 52 years. Frank started crying. Kevin, you're alive. Because of you, Frank. Because of you. If you hadn't saved me that day, I wouldn't be here today. The two men cried on the phone for half an hour. Kevin told Frank about his life, his wife, children, grandchildren. He said each one owed their existence to Frank. Frank, said Kevin, can I tell you something? I became a teacher. For 40 years I taught children. I saw each one as part of the second chance you gave me. Frank's heart was breaking from happiness. Kevin, I just saved my life, and not just mine. My family's too. My children's too. My grandchildren's too. After the phone call, Frank had become a completely different person. It was as if the 52-year burden on his shoulders had lifted. The next week, Kevin came to Springfield. They met at Frank's shop. When the two men saw each other, time stopped. Kevin hugged Frank. Here's my hero, said Kevin through tears. Frank looked at Kevin's aged face. That 19-year-old boy was now 71, but the spark in his eyes was the same. Kevin, you've aged beautifully. Kevin laughed. Because of you, Frank. Because of you. That day, Kevin sat in Frank's shop. Customers came and went. Kevin watched Frank work. Frank, said Kevin, you're still saving lives. What do you mean? I see how you look at your customers, just like you looked at me that day, as if they're your patients too. Frank smiled. Maybe they are. That evening, before Kevin left, he gave Frank a gift, an old photograph from Vietnam. You're in this photo, Frank. I'm in it too, and our friends. You know how I kept this photo? Frank looked at the photograph. Yes, he remembered. It was taken after he saved Kevin. I always carried this photo with me, said Kevin, because I didn't want to forget the memory with the man who gave me life. Frank took the photograph. After 52 years, he was reliving that day. After Kevin left, Frank hung that photograph on his shop wall. When Marcus saw this, he smiled. Frank, you're not hiding your past anymore. No, said Frank, because I realize that hiding my past doesn't benefit anyone. But sharing gives life, Marcus completed. From that day on, Frank began treating his customers differently. He wasn't just barbering anymore. He listened to them. He gave advice. Sometimes he even treated small wounds using his old medical knowledge. One day, old Mrs. Rodriguez came. Her husband was sick. Frank, she said, my husband has a strange wound on his hand. He refuses to go to the doctor. Frank looked at the wound. With his old experience, he understood it was a simple infection. Mrs. Rodriguez, let me prescribe an ointment for you, but still take him to the doctor. Mrs. Rodriguez listened to Frank's advice. When she came 2 days later, she said her husband had recovered. Frank, are you a doctor? Frank smiled. But once upon a time, I learned to help in difficult times. In Springfield, Frank's shop was no longer just a barber shop. It had become a kind of community center. People came not just for haircuts, but to chat, to get advice, and Frank was completely happy for the first time in his life, because he wasn't hiding his past anymore. He was sharing it, and this sharing gave him a new purpose. Marcus, watching Frank's transformation, thought, real heroism wasn't just in what happened in the past, but also in what was happening today. One evening, as Frank was closing the shop, he turned to Marcus. Marcus, I want to thank you. Why, Frank? Because you taught me to make peace with my past. You gave me the courage to find Kevin, and most importantly, you showed me that being hidden wasn't necessary. Marcus smiled. Frank, you were already a hero. I just noticed. But noticing is also heroism, said Frank. That night, as Marcus went home, he thought about Frank's last words. Maybe that's what real heroism was, not just doing great things, but also noticing the heroism around us. Frank Morrison was Vietnam's hidden hero, but now he was also Springfield's open hero, at least for Marcus, and this was sometimes the most beautiful story. Discovering that people who seem ordinary are actually not ordinary, and not forcing those people to stay hidden. Maybe that's what real heroism was. Quietly, without show, just being good. But sometimes also courageously, openly, being good by sharing. As Hidden Hero Stories, we ask you, have you ever met someone like Frank? Someone who seems ordinary but actually has an extraordinary story? Write their names in the comments, tell their stories, because here at Hidden Hero Stories, no hero is forgotten. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, subscribe, share. Help keep these kinds of stories alive. We'll see you in the next one. Until then, look a little more carefully at the ordinary people around you. They might have hidden stories too.